Good morning and welcome to News Check. My name is Abdiaziz Hashim. The sign language interpreter is Lensa Odingo. This morning we have a good discussion for you in the first hour as well as in the second hour. In the first hour, we'll be focusing on the affirmative action programs to ensure equal opportunities for the minorities and marginalized groups in the country. While joining us on set will be elite fellows from the minority groups ahead of the Minorities Day come August, and of course in the upcoming conference that will bring them all together from all walks of life later this year. That will be on December. That will be our focus this morning. My guests are already seated. Also, in the second hour, we'll be focusing on the Finance Bill 2024 as well as the budget. Remember that the Finance Committee led by Molo Member of Parliament, that is Kimani Kuria, conducted or concluded their public participation exercise yesterday at the Kenyatta International Convention Center. This afternoon, they will be meeting with various cabinet secretaries, including the man who proposes some of the issues that have been raised within the finance bill, that is Professor Njuguna Ndugu, who is also expected come Thursday to present the 4.006 trillion budget to Parliament, of course the highest in our history. That is all we have for you, but also we'll be talking to our reporters on field on various stories that are making headlines. Also, we'll be having our reporters stationed at Parliament buildings for various other committee sessions. We do understand that the Parliament Health Committee of the National Assembly will be conversing with the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers to try and end this particular stalemate between them and the government. We'll be briefing you on that as well, and we have other stories that are making headlines. We'll duly catch up with our reporters to inform us or brief us, given that this is our mandate. Talk to us on our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1 and at Abdiaziz Hashim 1. Now to it, on our first hour, we are focusing on the affirmative action programs. As I told you, I'm being joined by elite fellows from the minority groups ahead of the Minorities Day come August, and they will have a major conference that will bring them together at the Bomas of Kenya on December. Let me start to get to introduce them. On my immediate left, that is Mr. Eric Kimalit, the community elder within the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities of Kenya. Karibu sana, Mr. Eric.
Thank you.
And the gentleman in the middle, that is their chair. That is Mr. Charles Nadian. Have I said it correctly? Nadain. Thank you, sir, for the correction. He is the chair of the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities of Kenya. And the man adorned with the attire, he will explain to us why he has decided to wear like that this morning, is none other than Dr. Chris Galgalo, an educationist, also a member of the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities of Kenya. Protocol demands that I should start with the chair. Let's get to start with the chair. Chair, thank you for joining us and making time for us on this particular broadcast. The first question will be, who are these marginalized communities?
The marginalized communities are, as is directed in Article 260, it describes who the marginalized communities are and who the marginalized groups are. The marginalized groups have these characteristics. They are in the minority, they are fewer in population. Nationally, the indigenous found in a particular place. They profess their own cultural interests, which they will not want to be diminished. And they seek recognition. So all those, they practice, they have cultural practices that are unique to them, like others, like pastoralists, and they are mostly rural-based, and that is how the Constitution has described who the marginalized.
Yes.
These people are also vulnerable. It's not said, but because of the nature of who they are, they find themselves in a vulnerable position in such a way because of their numbers. Then they find themselves that they cannot participate effectively in terms of perhaps they cannot even form a ward constituency. So you find that they are not represented in county government, they are not represented in parliament, and so you find that these are marginalized, and therefore decisions are made about them without their voice. And so without their voice, they always find themselves at the margin So the marginalized is a general. You find that women could be majority, as they say, but they are marginalized in a sense that because of the cultural practices and where we mainstream, you find that there are fewer. And that's why there are laws in place that they are supposed, the laws that protect them so that they are in places where they are supposed to be. Okay. There are some ethnic communities, they are small in their numbers, population-wise, and because of that, it also calls that they are supposed to be given some affirmative action laws that will make them to participate.
Okay. Dr. Galgalo, I'm coming to you. Also, you can brief to our viewers the attire that you're donned. Plus, given that you're an educationist, you have been in this field. So what gaps, especially in the education sector, has the minorities groups been able to achieve to address some of the myriad of challenges that the chair is raising?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, just to add on what he said,
yes,
is marginalization means, in short term, exclusion from the mainstream of the government, of the communities, or any targeted policy. That's an exclusion. So according to their numbers, according to some people, it's not benefiting them in any way. So they are excluded totally in terms of education, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of social amenities, in terms of political representation, and what have you. So this is an exclusion which we are really fighting for. Then secondly, the attire is the identity of my community. The attire, the dress you put on, signifies the identity of your community. I come from YU community, whose identity, according to the cultural attires, is the way I've dressed. And again, I am the leader of that community nationwide. Yes. So as a king or as a chairperson or as a president, for that matter, I have to dress uniquely. Yes. So this is one of a representation of my identity as a community. Yes. Thirdly, coming to your question about education, I remember one time Nyerere said that when they got independence, he said, what do you want us to do for you, the people of Tanzania? The people said, you can develop the road, infrastructure, and what have you. But Nyerere said, no, those are the tools for development. The only thing I can develop you through that is education. So education, development comes in forms of education. If the people are empowered, they know their rights. If the people are empowered through education, they know what they stand for, and they will agitate for their right, and they will fight for their right. But according to the recent data, is that majority of these pastoralist areas, hunters and gatherers, and some fishing folks, they are completely out of education system, because what is targeting them as affirmative action is not bearing any fruit, because nobody was going around to collect the data as concerns the enrollment, because they are subsumed into the larger community. So to signify or to come out with the targeted population of this community in terms of education is very important. If you look at the previous census, 2019, it was mentioning about the poverty rate of a county, the GPD of that country, and what have you. But they have not singled out what is the level of their education, what is their level of poverty rate, what is the level of, whatever it is there. So we have not come out with that data that can address those education. But all in all, they have been completely out of that education system, because some of them are nomads. And fortunately, I was one time the chair of National Council for Nomadic Education. Okay. And they are leading a nomadic life. And so to target them, we came up with a policy. Actually, that was to address, together with UNICEF, and we came up with a policy saying, we take the school to the people, not the school to the, and not the people to school. We take the school to the people. In terms of livelihood, they are leading a nomadic life. So we go with them through a mobile school to reach out to these people. That is the target which we really achieved in terms of educational access, transition, and what have you. I thank also the government because they have come up with affirmative action in form of a boarding school, low-cost boarding school in all those counties where education is inaccessible. So that, particularly the pastoralists, hunters and gatherers, forest dwellers, and what have you, the education, they have established now that boarding school so that they can move with their livestock, but on the other side, they could access education in another way. So the other one is about Elimu scholarship, which the government came up with through the World Bank. They have brought that affirmative action where they said 30% of the minority and marginalized, not only the communities, other marginalized groups like women, gender, or persons with disability is included within this 30%. But the majority of those other people, still the gap is big because they get 70% and well, we get only 30%, which is not even comparable. So we wanted it as a affirmative action that it should be 50-50 so that we benefit equally, but not to put us at a lesser human being by getting only 30-70 goes to you. Still that gap will exist. And the policy as at now, they are reviewing Basic Education Act for 2024. They want to review the old one, which is 2013 Basic Education Act. Now they are reviewing. But there is a lot of gap also in that review. In fact, I've analyzed there is a lot of gap, which will disadvantage us even more. I'm sorry to say, it will disadvantage us even more. So some words which is targeting the minority and marginalized has been removed. Now it becomes amorphous. It becomes amorphous. Where we have National Council for Nomadic Education in Kenya, now they have changed it. This is the proposal. It has not yet come to an act. It says National Council for Marginalized Communities. Marginalized communities. National Council for Marginalized Communities. Anybody can come up and say, I'm also marginalized. We are also marginalized. That is not the occupation could define what you are and who you are and where you are. So if you say marginalized communities, it's amorphous. To me, it's amorphous from educational point of view. So you are not targeting a specific group to elevate them to the higher level through equity. If equity is not there, then we are no more. I'm telling you. Thank you.
In essence, Eric, what I want to ask is, where are these marginalized people? How many counties are under these communities? As well, talk to us in some of the issues that have been raised by the Chair and Daktari on those particular challenges that the minorities are currently facing.
Thank you so much. Most of our minorities and marginalized communities come from the ASAL counties. They also dry counties. And we know that 83% of Kenya is within those regions. We also have some people also like, there is a group which is here in Kiambu. We have some in the coast. We have the Nubians in Nairobi, Kisumu, Ravine, and other places. So they are spread all over the country. Now, I think also one thing I wanted to add to what my colleagues have said is about these, who are these minorities and who are these marginalized, and more so the indigenous. The indigenous, you find that they have a special connection to their land. They have a special connection, even their spirituality, the way they do their things. They specifically attach even to certain mountains, certain hill, the lake, not just the way you can visit as a guest and you just come back, you have seen water and land mass. So special connection to their lands is something very important, and they also have right to their self-determination, because you cannot go and tell water that you are not an indigenous or minority. They have the right, even in the UN charters, you have a right to determine, of self-determination. And about this marginalization, we find that from outside, maybe the education perspective, you realize that we have weak laws, or we have, for example, we have Article 56. Article 56 is affecting 4 groups. You have Article 56A, you have sub-article B, all the way to, I think, F. And what they have made it legal is the one which is dealing with women. That is why we have a Women Enterprise Fund. So there's a legal instrument through which the government can allocate some resources to those groups. And because they also perceived to be, they needed affirmative action because they were also marginalized or neglected for a long time. We also have the youth. And in the youth, women first, we have Women Enterprise Fund because there's a law providing for it. They have the gender ministry. This also talking about so much about the women issues, although gender is not about women alone. We have the youth, so at least we have some departments or some which are created by law, which are serving the youth.
Yes.
Another group is we have the people living with disability. They have, I think, a council. They have because there is law which is providing for that. Now it came to the marginalized and minorities, that is E and D and E. Then the Constitution, those sub-articles of the Constitution, Article 6, have never been operationalized because there is no act of parliament to operationalize, and therefore you cannot allocate public funds to those groups the way you can do for women. We have ways of fund, we have people living with disability, they have their own allocation from the National Treasury. So you find that those groups, particularly the one you are talking about, minority and marginalized, nobody has, for all those years, since we even promulgated the new constitution, they have not been able to have a law which is specifically saying or expressly provides for their support by the government. So that is what we need now. And one of the things we are saying is, part of that problem is that we are not marginalized. We don't have somebody of our own, or people of our own, who can champion our rights, even in the legislation forum. So that people always say, we are here to represent the minorities, the indigenous people, but themselves, they are not indigenous. Themselves, they are not marginalized. Themselves, they are not minorities.
Yes.
So it is time we are saying now, there is nothing about us without us.
Okay.
And there are two things. There's a table of decision making where people sit to make high-level decision making tables, and that's what I can call eating. And then you can also be on the menu. These guys around the table are discussing what is on the menu, and the minorities there have been in the menu for a very long time, and therefore it is the stuff which is being eaten. So until and unless we have our own people representing our own interest. Because Abdi, today, if you came to my community, which is Endora, is based mainly in Baringo, around Lake Bogoria, which were dispossessed of their land by the government in 1973, you can just come and see me, you can learn about a few things about us, but you don't know the leaves of that onion which are inside. Maybe you know our attire, our language, but there are certain things you don't know about us. How are we connected to the animals? How are we connected to the sun? How are we connected to the hills, the water, and all that?
Okay.
Our cultural and religious aspects. So we really need to represent ourselves as minorities in the whole country, so that some people may not come and purport to represent us, and therefore in the process they are actually misrepresenting us.
Okay.
So I think that is what is very important. And the other one, lastly, is Article 100. It's about appointive positions and the political positions. For example, the nominations to the county assemblies, nominations to the Senate and the National Assembly, the two houses of Parliament. You find that it has not also been operationalized, so that you can have a specific policy or provision where we can clearly say, now, you as minorities, who are you going to be there? Some people feel their relatives, their friends, in those positions because there is no law which is specifically saying, who are these people?
Okay.
And that is what we are really vouching for. We want at least the law to provide for that, so that nobody can have another excuse.
Okay, Chair, circling back to you, Daktari talked about some of the interventions the government has made, especially when it comes to affirmative action. What are the other benefits that you have been able to enjoy or the government has implemented after hearing some of the suggestions that you are making, or what would you like them to do?
First of all, the government, currently, this government is doing a lot of good things in terms of addressing the issue of marginalization. We now have an office,
yes,
under the office of the president,
yes,
which is there to receive such complaints, where it's a place where these people can go to. And last year on 18th December, we all gathered together, all marginalized, ethnic marginalized communities came together, and we celebrated in Bomas. That was a good thing. And the president promised to come up with a task force. I think because of the budgetary issues, that will be done. But he promised that will happen. We are going to do mapping for all. Of course, some of these, as Dr. mentioned, are undiscovered. So as we go out, some of them are hearing for the first time, and then they will start saying, oh, we are also marginalized. And so this kind of sensitization is very good. You are a government institution, and we will say that the government is also doing very well in sensitizing this matter. Issue of marginalization, much of the problem is lack of knowledge. The Constitution has provided rights. It's upon them to claim these rights. We have an office that has been given by the government. There is need for urgency for the members who identify themselves in that category to come up. Like the ones that Kimalik has mentioned. At least women, you can tell gender. This is a woman. If it's somebody living with a disability, he can rise and say, I am this kind of person. But marginalized is a bit tricky, so we need to come up with a framework of even identifying them to differentiate those ones who are really marginalized and those ones who may just want to benefit. Because if it is an open, everybody can come and claim. Yes. So we can say even the Article 204, which is going to, which was about 20 years, given 20 years, equalization fund. It doesn't focus on people. It focuses on regions, and it has become very political in such a way that it is the counties now that are claiming that my region is, requires this equalization fund. So you cannot pin it down, but it is also a good thing that was brought by the Constitution. Okay. More of what we need to do is to create awareness, to identify the people, to sensitize them, so that they can claim that right. Okay. Yeah.
Daktari, aside from the issues that have been raised, we know especially areas like North Rift, Northeastern, the issues of insecurity and the harsh climatic conditions that especially we've even witnessed the floods, and then after a few years or a few weeks we will be seeing some of the devastations of the drought itself. We know education is the silver bullet, but what other mechanisms has this community or these organizations that you represent have done to enable the communities that you represent are able to defend themselves or acclimatize to the situation that is happening around them?
Thank you very much. First, education is in the law and it's compulsory. So it is a government initiative to force that one to come out clearly that everybody must go to school. Two, climatic condition is natural. You cannot control them. But you come up with a mechanism that can sustain you in those dry land. And the only suitable things that can improve your economy is proper livestock rearing to keep these people at check. Secondly, on the same is there are many things which are now coming up, which is called agro-pastoralism. Yes. People, when there is rain, they catch the rainwater in form of a dam or in form of irrigation. They divert their attention to balance the equation is they do pastoralism as well as agricultural practices to sustain their livelihood. So when there is rain, and some of them have adopted what is called now silage, where they store the grass during the rain and then give it out to the livestock they have. The children are, as affirmative action, as I have said already. When I went to Sudan, Khartoum, North Kordofan, entirely they are practicing what is called pastoralism, like our people. But the government has came up with a mechanism that could target specifically these pastoralist people in terms of teachers training, in terms of curriculum, in terms of personnel, in terms of other facilities that is relevant to boost the economy. So we can adopt that one also to uplift the educational standard in those areas. Even Nigeria has tried mobile school to make these people to access this formal education. And at the same time, the government has done a lot, purposely because infrastructure development is not only to the national government, it is also through constituency development fund. The government has come up with certain percentage that could target education in those arid lands, because it is in the act, and that NGCDF is focusing on education for everybody as a compulsory education system. They have come up with a budget where they can address those issues at county level, constituency level, and what have you. On top of that, also there is bursary from the county government. It is allocated for bursary for those children. So if people come up jointly, even some NGOs are also targeting education for these people in those. If we put all these things into one basket and we address the education we want, definitely we can make that place to be another Canaan. That is what one time when we were attending a conference with KIPRA, regional conference on Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and in Kilifi, I learned a lot from that Israeli fellow who came up and said we can make desert into highland. By changing the whole system, by changing the mindset of the people. And people should come out of those traditional mechanisms where they cannot grow out, and then they impoverish in poverty. So if people are coming out to empower their own people through this political leadership, if they empower their people, they can come out and improve access of education in their own region. It is not only this, but on the other side, even the government through World Bank and other organizations like UNICEF have come up with the Elimu scholarship. Then we have another equity, wing fly or something like that. So it is communities' efforts and the national government effort to come together and improve on this. So if we make use of that affirmative action, of Article 56, and we operationalize, this issue will come to diminish, because the only thing that can make us at par with these people is that affirmative action. Affirmative action is to provide equity, not equality. Is equity, to uplift the person who is impoverished down there at the bottom of the society, to come up at the same level with other communities. But if we, like he said, equalization fund is not targeting the community, it is targeting the region. Already we have county devolution, already we have CDF, already we have other donor organization which is targeting the region in terms of billions and billions of money. Why are we not targeting equalization fund in form of equity to these marginalized communities, so that they will be at par with other communities within the same region? So a region is not targeting us as a community. Already it is amorphous. The policy is amorphous. The policy is amorphous because it's not targeting the individual community. How do we access or evaluate? Certain community is having high dropout, others are having high enrollment rate. How do you compare and what have you? So I think we need to revisit this policy of equalization fund, and we need also to have a representation, because if nobody is talking about your issue and you are not there, nobody is going to talk about your issue. Because we need to be there so that we say it out. If you don't say it out, who will say it out for you?
Okay.
Because it is you to where the problem is. It is you to say, like now we are saying.
Yes.
So I hope the government and policymakers and other initiators of various projects or NGOs can help us now to minimize or to reduce this gap of disparity among this community in terms of economical setup, in terms of education, in terms of any other social amenities that could address and elevate these people from the bottom to come up to this. The last one is, I remember what Obama said. He said, I will make the poor man to be at equal with the wealthy man. Initially, people thought it is a miracle you are doing, like there, I don't know. But then he said, no, I will not touch the wealth of anybody. He will not touch, he said. But he will come up with a policy that can elevate this poor person to be at par with those people at the same level. I rest my case.
Eric, well said, Daktari there. But Eric, earlier on you said, especially pastoralists, they're very attached to the animals they rear every day. You see, Daktari is talking about some of the innovative ways the government as well as other institutions have been able to come up with in terms of agriculture. So as an institution or as an organization or as a representatives of these people, are you sensitizing them on these upcoming issues?
Okay, thank you so much, Abdi. But first of all, let me just start from where you ended before I come to your question. What is so important, even when we talk about those equalization fund, affirmative action, you can still even devolve the marginalization. Because if you talk, for example, like a county, in a county, you say, okay, like say if it's Baringo or it's Marsabit, and you find that you say it is an area which requires some affirmative action so that they can be at par with the others. Still, when you go to Marsabit or you go to Baringo or Kilifi, you find that if you don't specifically identify those who are marginalized and the minority there, you will still, the money will be shared. You heard about the Baringo elected MCS recently. They are complaining about the equalization fund in that county because I think it came and it never went through the public participation and nobody knows what's happening. So until what my colleagues are saying is done, so that clearly there's law providing and identifying who are these minorities, then you can still take resources to those counties, but they'll never reach those marginalized. They remain marginalized at that county level. What is very, very important is that we should have social inclusion. That when you are talking about allocation of the resources to people you are discussing, the people themselves should be able to participate in decision making. You see, like in CDF, there is what they call in project management committees at primary level, health center, etc. They are the people who will decide what projects they want, they prioritize, and then they're the people who are going to say, we want to have this and this. And they don't get the money particularly. They just participate in a prioritization of these items and the management. The money checks just go to the contractor. That is participation. That is what kind of participation we would like to see in other affirmative action that is coming down to the people. So social inclusion, for as long as we don't have the people represented, the people who are marginalized, the people who are indigenous, the people, then we are not doing anything. We are only shifting that thing from the national level to the county level. Now, coming back to your question to me about the pastoralists or the people in those ASAL areas, I know for one, dry, harsh weather conditions in those areas is not new to them. Even this climate change, it's only worsening, but they have not been in the highlands like people in these, what they call the high potential agricultural areas. You find that they have what you call indigenous knowledge or traditional knowledge on how they will even be able to predict rain through the flowering of certain plants, certain months before even you don't see the clouds. So there is that traditional knowledge, which has, because of that marginalization and people being assimilated by other people, they are losing that traditional knowledge, which was very, very handy in terms of preserving the biodiversity and also keeping the animals for their livelihoods. And that is, for instance, now even in the UN, they are talking about the CBD. If you talk about the CBD Convention for Biodiversity, you find that the indigenous and local communities, which are majority of these minorities here in Kenya, you find that they are the only people who are now conserving 80% of complete biodiversity in the whole world, and yet they only occupy 20% of the land mass, and they constitute 5% of the human population of this planet. So why is the world moving towards that? It is because they know that down generations, they were traditional knowledge, and which is back to culture, and it has taste of time. And the people know how, if they can even predict and say, this season, we are going to have floods. Yes. This season, we are not going to grow this maize. The other thing is, we are also telling our people now, because you must have self-identity, because they are losing that because of assimilation by the bigger communities. Yes. So we also we are advocating for our traditional seeds, because we know if it is, you are talking about the, if you go to, you have the sorghum, you have the millet, you have certain grass, which was very resilient. Or when it rains, it takes a very short time, it germinates and matures. They all destroyed, and people are no longer valuing them, because they were made to believe that what would belong to them, or their knowledge or their tradition, was backward and therefore lost. So we are telling them it is good to come back to it, so that we can have now. Animals, for example, if you take a Frisian cow to Marsabit or Baringo, where we have war, in a way it's affecting our people in the Baringo side and the rest of the North Rift, you cannot go, and even if you give those people some Frisian cow or Jersey cow, they will die. Partly because of the heat. Number two, the diseases, they cannot resist. And therefore, the heat alone can even make them to produce a lot, and they will not eat. And you find that there isn't enough for them to eat anyway. But if you tell our people, we breed our animals now, the cows, the cattle, the sheep, we breed them so that we have the benefit of that resistance to, or tolerance to harsh climatic conditions, then they'll now start saying, oh yeah, we were told it is really helping them. It has helped the generations all the way, our forefathers. Okay. So we are now telling them it is good not to throw away what has served the community for many generations. And we thank the government, because there are so many projects which are coming through the ministries. They are very, like this government have, they are, for example, prioritized the dairy value chain, and also beef, which is common in the 84% of Kenya I talked about earlier. We also have the goats, we have the sheep, and people from the lakes and all the water bodies, they also have the fisheries. So this government has done very well, and I think this is the government, I would say, which is really, it came down to the people. Even during the campaign, His Excellency the President he told everybody wherever we were that now we need, what are your issues? You remember the county economic forums, which informed a lot about the manifesto of this government. And we really thank, there are so many projects, I can't enumerate them here, which we know they're in the pipeline. And we're now, also we have been given an office, and we have this directorate or a unit in this executive office. And we are now being conducted. Now that is inclusion is now coming in. Then we expect a lot of things to improve a lot going forward, because all actors, the government and non-government, we are all moving together in the same direction. Okay.
Chair, with this, a Kenyan who's watching us right now will ask, then if there are these challenges still existing till today, what was the essence of devolution? Because the advent of devolution was supposed to solve some of these issues faced in counties. Especially, you can even see the collaboration between the national and the county governments. They're even trying to resuscitate some of the municipalities through the various urban programs they're currently engaged in. So is devolution working, and what can be done to improve it so that it can address some of the challenges the communities are facing?
Thank you for that question. It is a matter of values and the people. The people who are put to be the administrators and leaders in the administration, in the county government, still hold the values which we were expecting to change. For instance, I come from the Bongomek community in Bungoma. Bongomek are the indigenous people, together with the others who are there, And it so happens that the name Bongomek is Bungoma is derived from this community. And but we were surprised at the invention of when now we were implementing devolution in 2013. Bongomek were left out totally in every sphere of life in Bungoma County. And so this community went to court. And the court listened to us. If you listen to their arguments against what we stood for, what we just wanted is recognition that we are also living there and that we deserved to be in that government. And you listen to the arguments that were given by the community, and you listen to the counter argument by the county government, then you will say something, a revolution needs to take place here. The court ruled that these people are minority and marginalized in this county and therefore should be treated as such. The county government went to appeal. And you see, this is a community that is poor. They cannot, going to litigation is very expensive. I'm just giving an example.
Yes.
And that applies almost everywhere where we have these people. So they went to appeal in Kisumu. You know, Bungoma and Kisumu is a big distance. Our lawyer, who was very good, they took him to be part of the panel of the county government panel. So there was conflict of interest. And so the whole term, after 2014, 2019, the government that we were against had elapsed. And so they declared moot. And thereafter they said, okay, the matter that is remaining is the issue of minority and marginalized. And then they said this matter has not been concluded in parliament. So the parliament has not put in place laws that will describe you who you are, so you cannot claim. And say until the government has made those laws, then you cannot claim yourself to be either marginalized or minority, and therefore you can't go to court. We listened to that judgment, and we said, okay, then why was the constitution, why were they put in the constitution in the first place? Yeah. First of all, we felt that that was discrimination for us to go through a long process for us to start realizing our rights. Now, we took the matter to Supreme Court. Now, that was COVID time, so it delayed in technical terms that, you know, we had 60 days for which we were supposed to do this. And so therefore the matter just went silent. Now what you do, what you are doing today is a good thing, because we need to point to the values espoused by the leaders, those who are obligated or duty holders to interpret the Constitution in terms of Article 10, which requires that we must have participation, we must have inclusion, and those who are minority and marginalized within those wherever are supposed to be protected. It's well written there. Then we have Article Section 97 of the County Government Act, which actually gives 30% of those ones who are in minor in that county to have their voice. That one is normally ignored. So you find that like a county like Bungoma, we have the Sabaots there, we have the Bongomek and others. But you'll find that you hardly can get that right. And because, again, you don't have the numbers, you are not represented in the county government to make the noise that is necessary. So those people keep on remaining at the doing about this. Yes. As the National Caucus, we have declared that every ethnic community that is marginalized, because not all minority communities are marginalized. We have communities that are well endowed, like Asians. They're economically well up, so they will not be having issues. Actually, they can, by their own economic sense, they can be included. They have their ways of getting there. But there are communities that unless in appointive or elective something happens, they cannot get their space there. So what we are doing is we want to encourage all community leaders, because every leader, we have people like Professor here, and those that don't have, at least they have people who speak for them.
Okay.
And so we want to call them, and the registration that we have makes every community to be a branch. And so we want to have issues of governance, we have issues where we have leadership on the ground, and they can speak at the county level up to the national level. And with the president appointing the office under his own authority, we believe that our voice is going to be heard to the highest office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daktari, we're talking about, yes, the legislations are there, the policy, the laws are there, but it seems to be lacking in some areas. So as an organization, what have you done? Do you have policies and frameworks that you're proposing, not just to Parliament, but to the office that is situated within the office of the President? Do you have substantive policies at hand that you will front come December?
That's not actually where I was as a National Council. It's not an organization as such. It is part of the government. It is a government saga, state. So they have their own policy of targeting those National Council, those pastoralist committees, hunters and gatherers, and fishing folks. And then urban Islam, even some places where they have completely marginalized from the set of education. That is what is. But as concerned now, coming back to our framework here, this is a good initiative which was started by the president. And you know, you can't, you are born today and then you run tomorrow. It can't. So everything is gradual. As we are now, there is a lot of development which is taking place. One, we have formed for this minority group or communities. Secondly, we are coming up with a framework which will be included also in the budget, national budget, and office of the president. We are waiting for that one. So thirdly, we are coming up with a policy to address this minority group. So you cannot come up with a policy without reaching out to these people where they are, how they are, and where do they live, and how are they living. What are their challenges? What are their achievements? How do we go about them to address those challenges? So unless you go to the grassroots, you cannot come up with a policy. And most of the time, the government or any organization comes up with a policy, but lacks implementation. So what we are asking now, if we come up and reach out, there's a task force which President promised. We reach out to the communities where they are, and address their challenges wherever they are. And we meet them one-on-one. After we have got their challenges, achievement, and how are the people from the county level, from constituency level, and how are this money being used to target them or addressing their challenges, we shall get all those information. It is like the task force on education, where the president later on addressed the issue, the national issue on education. But all in all, we must come up with a policy that is all-inclusive. Inclusive in the sense that we reach out to every minority community and marginalized, and to see what are the degrees of marginalization within this community. And we must also work with the county government. We must work with the national government. We must work also with the constituency level at the parliament, because it is where the laws are made. In the county, the executive and the county assembly make laws. The national make laws. Senate make laws. So we are targeting all these. Within that framework, we can come up with a policy. And that policy must address now the challenges of these minority and marginalized communities, and then we are able to address those policies. Secondly, on the same policy, unless probably you, from now unit, there is, we are being protected by executive order, presidential executive order number 2 by the president. As far as he's in power, we are protected. And he is a good person. He is the one who came up with this initiative, that he created even this unit. In Nairobi now, we know where our office is, among other offices. So we address this one. Then secondly, it's an act of parliament. Unless you make a law through an act of parliament addressing the challenges of this minority and marginalized community, policies cannot come out just independently. Because policy emanates from an act of law or an act of parliament. And then from there now, you come up with a regulation. How to implement those policy, not policy, an act of parliament through a regulation. What are you going to do to elevate these people from bottom up? The bottom-up policy now comes in also in our case. So we address this issue from bottom up through that constitutional framework. So it is a matter of time. We give it time, but we have not done our homework. We have not done our homework because you cannot come up with a policy until you go to the ground. That is what is called public participation. So our public participation must start from the grassroots, not at a national level, must start from the grassroots. And then we embrace these ideas, and through this consultation, we are able to come up with a policy framework. And then from that policy framework or finding, then we can address those issues. This is how it should be done through an act of parliament. That is how it should be done.
Given that we're entering the final leg of our conversation, we're about to wind up. Let me start with you, Eric. As you wind up, tell us about, given that intercommunity clashes has been there for a while, it has been witnessed over the years, what is the organizations that you represent or you work for or represent the people you work for have been doing about this as we wind up?
Thank you so much. Maybe so that I don't forget, I really wanted, and this being my last leg of the session, I think personally and on behalf of our communities also, we really thank the president so much because it is his goodwill that has seen us here. And even what I said about there is nothing about us without us is something is implemented because the director who's in minorities and marginalized affairs unit is himself from a minority group. So we know that we have that hope. But as he said, that is a goodwill of the president. What happens tomorrow when there's another person who doesn't recognize these people? Then that is where legislation now comes in. And I think about the conflicts in the regions. I come from the Endorise community, and we occupy 15 locations in Baringo County, one in Laikipia and one in Nakuru. And we are really one of the communities which has been affected since 2005. We have lost almost 500 people to those conflicts, and we have lost a lot of wealth, and people have really been impoverished, families have been broken down. There's a lot of degeneration of our environment. So there is a whole host of things which need to be done. It cannot be done by us alone. This group, we are advocating, and we have to work with the government. And even areas where we have issues with the government, like those litigation issues, like even in Endorise, we took the government to AU, African Human Union, and People's Rights in Banjul. And there are decisions made on behalf of, in favor of the Endorise community. But 14 years down the line, nothing has happened. What I wanted to say is that even now, we don't want to have a combative engagement with the government. We want a very amicable solution at the table. What can we do? We are also rational human beings. We can know what's not possible and what is possible. So what we are doing there is to promote the peace efforts together with other parties, even the NGOs, our leadership. We tell people, we encourage people to come together, and we also ask the governments at both levels to, at least if it is now like our side and our neighboring communities, then can you take water to them Can you take they develop pasture for them and also develop for us, so that these resource-based conflicts can be reduced. And we also find that for many years, I think the current government has really done a lot. I think you don't hear a lot of gunshots and a lot of reporting, even from our area in Baringo and all the way to Elgeyo Marakwet, Samburu, because there are around 5 counties around there. Now, we thought for a long time there were some forces we don't understand, because where do these cows go? If you take 1,000 cows during Sarana Mchana, and then it's not raining, it's not cloudy, and then you are told they are not seen. So we are now trying to say, can you work together with the government? Can you also get people who are, if there are bad elements amongst us, can you also single them out for the benefit of the good of all? So it is something, I would say, it is a process, not an event. It is not something we can say, put it on, put it off. We have to work together, but we are really urging everybody through all the stakeholders to make sure that we have peace prevailing, and making sure that everybody has a cake of what should be there.
Okay, let me allow the chair at least a minute to close this session for us. Chair, as we look upon the coming days, especially later this year on December, that given that we'll be converging in Bomas and the Minorities Day come August, what will be your last word in just 1 minute?
Actually, we have a checklist, and we are hoping that by that time, many of these issues will have been checked out. Of course, there is the issue of determination. Determination is in the Constitution, so that we have checked out.
Yes.
Affirmation that we exist is not in debate. That has been checked out. The issue of identification, which Dr. has mentioned and Eric has mentioned, that we need to deal with. Who is a minority and who is not a minority? So that we need to comfortably deal with it. It is still pending. The issue of promotion, we can say that the head of public service, Brother
Felix
Koskei, in many cases is always talking about make sure that the minorities are considered. That is promotion. We will wish that that can extend to many of the officers and county officers. The issue of protection and prevention. Once we are recognized, then we will need to be protected that we don't relapse back, because most of our people are invisible. They are not known. And what Eric was talking about, assimilation, as long as we have policies that allow assimilation to continue taking place, then the issue of prevention and protection still hangs, and we would like to deal with that. And that also, if you are not identified, then inclusion becomes a problem.
Okay.
So the issue of inclusion, it will still be hanging as we. Then in our values, we have the issue of development and advancement. That still hangs on who are you. If you are not properly identified, then those two cannot it will still be hanging. Then we have the issue of urgency, making sure that, you see now, like we are here, we are talking about our minority communities.
Yes.
So this is urgency, and we want it to go down to the grassroots.
Okay.
And also now these values, what you value is what you hold dear. Okay. I believe that KBC is trying to give value to minority and marginalized communities, and that's why we have this program. Okay. We would expect that this extends to different sectors, and in a sense, that is what I would say. As we go for that celebration, we'll be listing this and saying this has been done.
Okay, Chair. Thank you so much. That is the National Chair, Charles Nandein, of the ethnic minorities and marginalized communities in Kenya, as well as Dr. Chris Galgalo. Thank you for making time, an educationist under the same umbrella as well, with Eric Kimalit, the community elder, in the same umbrella. Gentlemen, thank you for making time for us, and hopefully our dear viewers, whoever you're watching or wherever you're watching us from, hopefully the discussions have been fruitful. You can carry on the conversation both on and offline, given that we're set to mark the Minorities Day come August. In the second hour, we'll be talking about the finance bill as well as the budget budget. My guests have already arrived in studio. That is Professor Benjamin Koskei. He is also a Dr. Benjamin Koskei, a governance expert. Oscar Omondi, a political analyst, is already here. Philip Pande, youth inclusion advisor, as well as an economist, is also here. And James Chwanya, a tax manager from PKF, will be carrying on the conversation. We're taking a short commercial break. Don't go too far.
Kikohozi cha muda wowote, kutokwa na jasho kwa wingi usiku, uchungu kwenye kifua, afya kudhoofika, tafuta matibabu.
Chona, yes I am. Hey.
Fallen soldiers, we miss you. I know you got me with you. Bimwa TV, TV wa ishipa. Bimwa TV, TV wa ishipa.
Je, una malimbikizi ya ushuru? Mamlaka ya utozaji ushuru nchini KRA inakupa msamaha wa adhabu na riba ya ushuru kufikia tarehe 31 Disemba 2022 kupitia Tax Amnesty Program. Ili kujua jinsi ya kupata msamaha, jiunge nasi kwenye maonyesho ya barabarani kote nchini ukiletewa na KRA kwa ushirikiano na KBC. Pia tutakuelekeza jinsi ya kujaza fomu za ushuru na kujisajili kwa e-Teams, mfumo mpya unaokusaidia kutoa risiti za kidijitali kwa njia rahisi. Jumanne tarehe 11 Juni, msafara wetu utaingia kaunti ya Nakuru katika maeneo ya Naivasha, Gilgil, Nyahururu, Olkalao, Subukia, Bahati, Langalanga na mji wa Nakuru. Kisha Jumatano tarehe 12 Juni, tutazuru mitaa inayopatikana Nakuru, Njoro, Elbagon, Molo na Mau Summit. KRA, tulipe ushuru, tujitegemee. Thursday, 13th June 2024. All eyes will be on the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u as he presents the 2024-2025 budget statement policy. For an in-depth coverage of the budget policy statement, comprising the highlights of how it will affect you, expert analysis and citizens' views, tune in to KBC Channel 1 on Thursday from 7 a.m.
qualifying for the 2026 FIFA World Cup.
Mwezi huu jungu limealika ukoko. Tumekuandalia michuano ya kufuzu katika kombe la dunia mwaka 2026 barani Afrika. Kenya itamenyana na Cote d'Ivoire tarehe 11 Juni saa 10 alasiri. Tizama mechi hizi moja kwa moja katika KBC Channel 1 kutoka uga wa Bingu mjini Lilongwe, Malawi. Kadhalika utachambuliwa na kupata habari za mechi. Channel 1, your true sports partner.
On KBC Channel 1, we are a TV station like no other. Get a taste of the best in entertainment.
Yes, indeed.
Feel the passion.
Will you promise me?
I swear that you will never lose me. I can't get married to you.
I'm sure you knew about it. That's why you're making fun of me.
Experience the drama.
Get out.
Who's the man in this one?
And the laughter.
Hii wigi umevaa kichwani.
Sisi wakati tulikuwa tunapishwa tunapewa mheshimiwa.
Move to the beat.
We are live from Broadcasting House.
And get informed on the latest happenings. KBC Channel 1.
Wow. Yeah!
We are the full package.
Oh yes.
And Kenya's watching.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Hours in Rusinga are mostly cool and refreshing. One may not want to transit into an afternoon, especially after waking up to the soothing chirping of birds. From the fish eagle to elusive double-toothed barbets, as well as sunbirds and kingfishers, Rusinga is simply among the best when it comes to a bird lover's paradise. The Rusinga Island holds up to 369 bird species. At Rusinga Island, the birds' concentration is thickest at sunset when they return to roost. The 16-kilometer-long island lies on the eastern stretch of Lake Victoria, with most of the birds feeding on the fish from the lake. The island, also known as a breeding ground for many of the bird species, has birds perched on trees basking in the sun, if not fishing or just frolicking in the water. One of the most favorite birds to repeat clients here is the fish eagle. The bird holds cultural significance in many African communities. It is often a symbol of power, strength, and freedom. The African fish eagle has a dark body and a white head, with the females being larger than males. The eagles are considered among the top predators, and their fishing tactics are arguably mesmerizing. The little white egrets, on the other hand, are known for their distinct features. The egret is nomadic, depending on water levels in wetlands, and migratory too. The African jacana, also famous at the Rusinga Island, has long toes and long claws that enables it to walk on floating vegetation in shallow lakes, which turns out to be its preferred habitat.
And I actually like the place because of the nature and the cooling effect of the water. Yeah, it's a beautiful place, and the lake is also a source of livelihood for a lot of people around.
Wageni wakija hapa watapata kama manufaa ya huu barini na manufaa ya huu kanti ni ubora zaidi, kwani tuko na mahoteli nyingi, zingine ziko pale, zingine ziko pale, zingine ziko hata kwa visiwa za huku ndani.
The beautiful Rusinga Island also has attractive beaches on the shores of Lake Victoria, which can hardly go unnoticed. Irene Mutshuma Odin, Marge Cole Saints, and Rusinga, the county of Homa Bay.
Welcome back for this second hour. As you can see behind me, we're all talking about money matters. This week is very important, one for the Finance Bill 2024, and on Thursday we do anticipate the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, that is Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, will be heading over to Parliament to present our very highest budget we've ever prepared in our country. That is a 4.006 trillion budget that he'll present before Parliament, and of course has been divided accordingly by the Budget Committee led by Kiharu Member of Parliament Ndidi Nyoro. That is our conversation. We'll be focusing on. Talk to us on our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1 and at Abdiaziz Hashim 1. Taking us through this conversation, we do have a host of experts and analysts, as well as experts from the field themselves. I want to understand from James Chwanya, the tax manager from PKF. Have you had a chance to present your cases before the finance bill?
Yes, we did. We had the opportunity to present our submissions to the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning.
Okay.
Last week, but one.
Okay.
And I think as of yesterday, they formally closed that process.
Okay, James. Thank you for that. Thank you for confirming that so that the viewers could know as well. We also have here Oscar Omondi, political analyst. Oscar, karibu tena. Yes, and then Philip Apande, a youth inclusion advisor as well as an economist major. Thank you for coming in as well.
Thank you very much, Abdi, and good morning to our viewers.
And finally, we do have a professor, or rather a Daktari Benjamin Koskei, governance expert, also a man who wears various hats. That is, he's also a lecturer from Kenyatta University. Thank you for making us time for us this morning. Let me start with you, James, going back to you. Yesterday you had a briefing. You had clearly stated the positions of PKF in terms of the taxation measures the government has proposed, especially from the National Treasury. Would you say some of the recommendations you had made before the committee could be considered?
I think, as we rightly pointed out yesterday, that is part of a public participation process which is enshrined in law.
Yes.
And the committee has the power to listen to the various submissions that are made. They will retreat back and look through the recommendations and probably bring sufficient changes that they can introduce to the National Assembly. So yes, I have faith that some of the submissions that we made, both before the committee and through the press briefing, will be looked into. The most contentious ones we hope can be dropped, and for the positive ones we hope those will be retained.
We'll be coming to us. You explain to us what are those benefits that you have been able to be accorded that will be beneficial to the economy, and what are those that are hurting the economy. Let me go to Daktari. Daktari, you have seen from various organizations, from members of the public, before the Finance Committee, even outside the Finance Committee. You, as not just a lecturer, but a doctor in this particular field, what are your thoughts on the public participation exercise, especially on the Finance Bill itself?
Thank you, Abdi. For public participation, I think it is a very crucial segment in terms of making the finance bill. But I want to believe that they may not necessarily take in all the proposal. I understand that in this country, you may make a lot of proposals, but when they retreat to write the final report, they may not make a lot of changes. Maybe 5%, maybe. But many players came up with good proposals and amendment. Like, for example, you see when they are coming up with this budget, whatever, they are informed by many things.
Yes.
Number one, the global level. That is IMF, the players, the UN. Number two is the interest. The politicians have their interest. Number three is the budget. Okay? Number 4 is maybe decided cases. The KRA losing a case in course, they go back and make some amendment and raise taxes. And maybe the last one is policy, okay? The policy, the National Policy Act.
Okay.
So public participation is very important.
Okay, Dr.
But for me, they may not take in all the proposals. Yeah.
Philip, this is not just the first time. In 2023, we were in the same scenario. How do you gauge this time around, especially from the finance bill, especially from this political class? Last year, we saw how emotive it was. This time around, we've seen the political class quiet about it.
It's quite an interesting time, especially on the aspect of public awareness and public participation in matters governance and public finance in this country, which I think it's a really good step towards improving our democracy as a country. Initially, you are quite aware that the public was not very focused on the finance bill, and sometimes would just listen to the budget policy statement or the budget appropriation bill itself discussed or read in Parliament by the minister in charge of the National Treasury without much fuss and without much detail. But I think in the advent of the new constitution and lately more awareness on public participation and more awareness on circulation of documents, especially in the quest for e-governance, documents such as the finance bill fly around and it's available on our phones, and so it's possible to know a lot about it. Significantly, as we talk about the improvement of democracy and governance, the most important thing certainly is the voices of the people. Is the finance bill working for the people or working against the people? And the people in totality should be the government, because the government is the voice and the representation of the people. So if the public, there is a wide public outcry that it's not working for us, then certainly it's not working for government. So in all aspects, it is for the government and people advising government to find out what could work for government, what could work for the public, and what could work for the nation. And I'm just taking key on what Dr. is alluding to, that it's guided by the IMF, guided by the UN and so forth. Sometimes budgets, and especially our policy formulation and policy documents, must be guided by the local context before the international frameworks, before other external forces. Of course, we exist within the global spectrum where we relate to other nations, we borrow and live from other democracies. But again, as policy formulators and policy proponents, we say that cut and paste in policy formulation does not work for economists, does not work for democracies. So it has to be an original document that reflects the realities on the ground, the realities of the people. Prof. or Doc here will tell you that one thing that they punish in the academia is plagiarism. Yes. And plagiarism means that you're taking somebody else's work and claiming to be your own. So our finance bill, our budget must be original to the context and to the realities of the people of Kenya.
Okay. Omondi, now you have the cherry of the bite. Tell us what piqued your interest, especially given that you had talked about this initially weeks ago when we were talking about the finance bill, when the exercise was about to start. Now the exercise has concluded. What piqued your interest? And also, given that you're a political analyst, how do you gauge the mood of these politicians as we head over to Parliament?
Thank you very much again, Abdi. I take a different trajectory on how some of these things are happening or are panning down now at the moment. Something to do with what Dr. Ari calls about the public participation. This is the only time, as a political scientist, as a political in politics discipline, for this is the only time that we are having Kenyans really participating in economic issues. as much as that Parliament and parliamentarians might not be able to implement what people say or whatever the outcomes of the public participation exercise, it doesn't really matter for me. What matters for me so much is that now Kenyans are so much interested on how their monies are being spent. So whether they implement those things, that's a different question. But the fact that a lot of people are coming out to participate in public participation exercise, that's a very good thing, a very good sign of very many things that are coming. The same thing will be, if it is reflected also in the counties, that the Mwananchi down there gets to participate in governance. Governance as in, they get to understand and discuss the budgets of the counties too. The same way, the national level and other processes. We expect to see other processes like the budgeting committee. The budgeting committee has not done very good, according to me, very good public participation exercise. That's why people still don't understand what is happening in the budgeting process. But you see, the finance committee, led by the Molo MP, has done at least a robust thing in terms of this thing to do with the financial, the Finance Act of 2024 and 2023. You know, a long time ago, finance acts are done every year, but you never used to hear a lot of agitation about that particular act, as opposed to the way it has been for the last 2 years. So I'm sure even the Finance Bill 2025, we will see a lot of stuff going on and people discussing and public participation. And public participation doesn't have to be, according to me, going to sit with the Molo MP at Parliament buildings. Even at other avenues, other forums, people see it. People who are sitting at Boda discussing about the finance bill, the Wanjiko sitting down there, Mamboka sitting down there, what are they discussing? They're discussing the finance bill. That means that people are so much interested on how they're governed, how their monies are being used, how they are taxed, and what the revenue expenditure, how it will be spent by the people in government and people in authority. I think as a political scientist, it's a good thing. Whether it's implemented or not, it's a different story. But the fact that people are so much concerned. And this one, the public opinion, the opinions that are brought out of this, you know, we can only measure the voter behavior after every 5 years. We measure the voter behavior. But public opinion is measured every time during the process. And you can see other public opinion survey organizations like Infotech, they also bring and questions people on how people think about the taxation regime that is going on and what are people discussing. To the last person, at least now, even the people who are not in universities or in institutes like where my brother works, are able to sit down and discuss the finance bill. I think it's a good thing, and the constitution that we put in place, which was a participatory constitution, is taking shape very well.
And as we continue with this conversation, if you're just joining us, we're talking about the finance bill of 2024. Public participation concluded yesterday, but we have been informed that in the afternoon there will be a session that will be led by the Molo Member of Parliament, where they'll be meeting various ministries, especially the Treasury, given that they led with these proposals, the Taxman, which is the Kenya Revenue Authority, Attorney General, Environment, Trade and Transport Ministries in the afternoon, to talk about some of the proposed tax levies. Like, for example, the environment, when we talk about eco levy, transport, we have the motor vehicle tax placed at 2.5%. Why is that the case? We'll get to understand from the various cabinet secretaries who will be appearing before that particular committee, or the principal secretaries. If they will fail to show up, they will send their principal secretaries while they are accounting officers of the various ministries. But as we continue with this conversation, let's get to hear from the members of the public what they're saying about this Finance Bill 2024. We had taken a little bit of vox pops in terms of this particular bill and how it will impact not just their businesses but their day-to-day operations. So let's get to hear from them.
Mina nasi ma MP, tafadhali msipitishe hiyo kitu. Unajua kitu itaingia hapo kwenye, msipitishe, maisha ni magumu. Ikipita hapo mkipitisha, sasa watu sisi kama sisi raia tutaumia sana kuliko vile tunaumia saa hii. Hata hii matuza ushuru hatutaki. Ushuru ilikuwa zamani, lakini ilikuwa shilingi pana kama saa hii. Saa hii hata nyumba ushuru. Nini ukishika kitu ushuru, ukifanya biashara ushuru, kuku ushuru, tunateseka sana.
Kama hii mambo ya ya hii nini ya finance bill kupitishwa, mimi kwangu naona wasipitishe, kwa maana maisha ni ngumu. Sasa wakipitisha ndio tunaenda kuzama, kama tayari tumezama. Sasa wakipitisha je? Mimi naomba tu MPs tafadhali, sisi ndio tunapitishanga nyinyi, kura mnapata kwa sisi, tafadhali msipitishe, tutaumia vibaya.
Wabunge bwana, misionele mpitishe hii kitu. Ya the previous year ilikuwa noma, vijana wanaumia huku nje hawana makazi. Ingekuwa at least mnashughulikia na vitu kaa hizo, mtu akiwa na mali anatoa kitu itakuwa better. Lakini sawa, angalia watu hawana kazi, bado mnataka kuongeza taxes. So ni nini unanyonga hapo? Already unaumiza mtu mwenye ameumia na kitu ya kutoa.
It is moved from taxes. And therefore that means that the prices of those essential commodities will go much higher. And Kenyans are really going to face the wrath of a very difficult economy going forward.
Those are the sentiments of Kenyans as well as members of Parliament. It is a crucial week. Let me start with James. James, you've heard from the members of the public. Yesterday you had a briefing, and I can see even have your presentation here that you presented yesterday in that particular press briefing. You're talking about the punitive motor vehicle tax. What are these other issues that you have signaled, and what are your proposals going forward?
I think I want to thank you very much, Abdi. I want to pick up from where my colleague stopped. In the issue of tax policy. I think we have to also give it to the credit to the government in terms of their legislation going forward and their intention going forward. In the last couple of years, we've had an issue or a discussion around the national tax policy, which has never really come to into play. We've had drafts, we've had the policy presented to the National Assembly, but it was only until last month where we formally had the national tax policy that has been passed and that has been adopted. It is our request that even going forward, in as much as that national tax policy has already been passed, it should therefore be implemented so that it doesn't just become another policy that sits on the shelves. Now, if you see the reason we advocate for national tax policy is because of the changes that come with the legislation been proposed in the national tax policy is the issue on a review of legislation.
Yes.
Now, as my colleagues rightly point out, we normally have the finance bill on a year-to-year basis.
Yes.
But it was only up until last year when we got so much debate around it because of the introduction of the affordable housing levy. But this is a process that takes place on a year-to-year basis. Now, if you go to investors, and investors will want to invest in the country because we are actually attracting investors in the manufacturing industry and across different sectors, how then would they be able to put the kind of investment they'd want to put in the country if the nature of our tax industry, if the nature of our tax keeps changing on a year-to-year basis? And therefore, what the policy is recommending for is a stability in terms of taxes going forward, and a level or a time frame under which the taxes cannot just have to change on a year-to-year basis. If you look, for example, the finance bill proposals that we have this year, some of those proposals actually intend to revise the very changes they brought in last year. And the ones they're bringing in this year are changes that we've seen the government attempt to bring in on a year-to-year basis. So what the policy then is going to do, and is a very good thing when implemented, is that it will give investors and even the general public some bit of stability in terms of the taxes going forward. Now, in terms of another measure that I would say the government has actually done better is even for the employees themselves. We've always had some bit of benefits that are given, the non-taxable benefits given to employees. We are aware of the non-cash benefits given to employees of up to 3,000 that is not taxable on a month-to-month basis. The bill has proposed to increase that limit from what it currently is of 36,000 to 48,000. Meal benefits given to staff, there's also a proposed increment on that kind of threshold. For majority of the public who trade who trade or sell various items, there is a VAT that is applicable to everyone. The threshold for VAT registration is currently at 5 million. It therefore means that majority of the taxpayers, once you hit the 5 million threshold, then it becomes mandatory to register for VAT, even with the advent of teams that has come into force.
Yes.
What the government has proposed to do is to increase that threshold from 5 million to 8 million. It's not very ideal to leave it at 8 million, though it's a welcome move, but we actually would have even hoped that the amount can go up a little higher, to about 15 or even 20 million, but it is a step in the right direction.
Okay.
Moving on, in as much as there are those positive steps, there are also the negative impact that the finance bill is also seeking to have on the economy and the general public in itself. The negative effect is the one that most people have talked about, the motor vehicle circulation tax. And you look at the manner in which it is intended to be taxed. I think if you remember back, Abdi, about 2-3 years ago, we had the proposed introduction of the minimum tax, and which the courts at some point had to stop, and which is currently not in force. And what the minimum tax was attempting to do is to tax, reimpose a tax on revenue as it is, rather than the net gain. What the motor vehicle tax is attempting to do is to introduce a property tax in itself. Our view is that that is against the provisions of Section 3 of the Income Tax Act, because in the very sense, what then you'll be taxing is you're not taxing the income or the gain that comes from it, but rather the motor vehicle circulation tax itself.
Okay.
And coming in with the motor vehicle circulation tax, you see the net effect is the common one who was talking, because you look at the manner in which the tax is meant to be introduced. You are introducing a tax of 2.5% on the value of the motor vehicle. Now, there are many factors that we'll have to look at if we have to value that motor vehicle. But to what extent is the motor vehicle in use? Because we have commercial vehicles. We've not seen an exemption on school buses themselves. And the effect of an increase in the motor vehicle tax, or even on school buses, it means that the level of the school fees will have to go up, because that has an effect. It also has an effect on public transportation. It equally has a serious effect on the companies that are, or the entities that are not exempted, because what the government has done is it has introduced exemptions for the very government agencies that they have, but left the rest of the Kenyans out of it.
Okay.
Besides the motor vehicle taxes, I think I've seen the Member of Parliament talk about the reclassification of items from exempt or from zero rating to exempt.
Yes.
And you look at the items in which the government has attempted to reclassify. Now, one of those items is affect the tourism industry. The construction or the materials that are in use for the construction, for the tourism, for the recreational parks. And that is an item that has attempted to, or always been moved by the government from time to time.
Okay, James.
We're coming from COVID-19, and the effect of COVID-19, we know that the impact that it has on the general economy.
Okay.
Ordinary bread, for example. Why would you tax ordinary bread if it's currently zero rated? Why would you introduce a tax on it on 16%? Because it's no longer just any other luxury item. So the changes are there. The net effect is that the changes that were introduced last year and the ones that are being introduced last year tend to have some bit of a punitive aspect in the industry. The changes are about close to 60 on the finance bill themselves.
Okay.
And maybe perhaps if you give me more time, then I'll be able to.
I will give you, we have that time.
Yep.
Let me head over to Philip. While you respond to, you've just heard sentiments from Kenyans there, but the element of James is talking about, it's not only PKF that has talked about. Every Kenyan or every organization that have come before the Finance Committee have been decrying, why don't we make this finance bill predictable for businesses so as to attract investors and boost their businesses within our country? Given that the government currently is focusing on manufacturing, some of the manufacturers in the country are saying that this will inhibit them from starting up those industries that are within their confines and take them elsewhere in other countries like Uganda or Tanzania, and then send those goods and services to us duty-free?
Well, Abdi, the argument here as an economist would be government has always an opportunity to evaluate the net effect of any policy. The fact here being the discussion around the finance bill that would be guiding our collections for at least the next one fiscal year. What is the overall rationale? Is it regressive? Is it proportional? Is it progressive on the place of mwananchi? And I think the denominator here is that, like you say, everybody appearing before the finance committee is saying the same thing. Of course, people would want a reprieve. People would be happy in a nation not paying taxes at all.
Yes.
But like the Bible says, you give what belongs to Caesar to Caesar. We run the government, we run the economy based on contributions of wananchi and businesses and partners. We're looking today at a budget of just shy of 4 trillion, and at least with a huge deficit still. We are looking at revenues of about 3.3 trillion against 3.9 trillion budget. And you're looking at 10% of our revenue still coming from appropriation in aid. If we get that kind of support, what reprieves are we having? But like James says, sector-wise, who is affected? We're talking about last year. It was more of the employed Kenyan that was going to check out more in terms of the housing levy, which was more controversial. Today we're talking about something like the eco levy that touches the household in many ways. I'll give you I'll demonstrate two aspects. One is on diapers, and we've talked largely about this.
Yes.
Today in Nairobi, out of every 100 shillings, at least 40 shillings goes to food in household consumption. But what is the cost of one diaper? It's about 50 shillings or more, the average cost of many other products that are, brands that are available in the market. A little tinkering in terms of taxation on that product alone raises household expenditure on non-food items, which means the capacity of the houses to even save a little income to work on different aspects of their livelihoods becomes difficult. Mobile phones. Today we have the phones that are paid on pay-as-you-go, people pay for motor vehicle. Today it's the mobile phone that many households and many people today are paying a daily fee or a weekly fee or a monthly fee to own their mobile phones. If we introduce the eco levy, which also touches on the prices of my mobile phones, then it means you shifting that ability to pay on a daily basis, because the income levels will still be the same. You're shifting the ability to pay, and what we call in economics the can afford line is getting higher and higher. If you could hold it last year, then it would be further drifting away from you. How then are we able to deal with these dynamics without affecting individual consumptions? It means therefore that if I can't do without the phone, then I have to go down, go slow on food. If I can't afford diapers, then probably I'll need to get a makeshift, or probably go back to what they used on some of us those days. Okay. But all in all, what we are saying is the essence of the bill and the essence of taxation is to help us get to some level of sufficiency or internal dependence, but to also make it possible for the citizens to afford what they need to afford, but again give to what needs to go to the government. I'll combine this, Abdi, with what you asked me about the political class and their sense of the finance bill this year and so forth. I think this year you see more of opposition on the finance bill coming from the government within government itself. Yeah. Where the presidency is split,
How so?
Right.
We cannot prove that. Is it split?
So what we're saying, you've seen senses of...
yes, we can't prove that.
One person trying to say that we are going to oppose this. I'll give you a contrast of last year when it was the opposition, leading the hunt against the finance bill.
Which they still are, under Kalonzo.
Under Kalonzo, but the shift... I'm saying that the pivot has shifted from, the external forces to the internal forces. So are we agreeing holistically that the finance bill as proposed today is good for government and it's good for the citizen? Like I said, if it's good for the citizen, it's good for government. If it's bad for the citizens, it's hurting government.
Okay. Let me play a devil's advocate here, Daktari. Even the finance chair asked this particular question to everybody who was coming before its committee. If we are not willing as Kenyans to pay these taxes, given that the current government and the various administrations that we are under in, they're trying to create this self-reliance within our borders so that we don't have to keep on borrowing from the World Bank and other international organizations like the IMF as well. So if we do not pay our taxes, then who will?
Thank you, Abdi, for that question. The MP for Molo, Kimani Kuria, asked that question. I think it was a rhetoric question. Because we have been surviving. We have been paying tax. But what Kenyans are saying, you are now introducing punitive taxes, like this motor vehicle.
But not everybody who has a car. If it is exempted, because some of the suggestions that are being made, if we exempt it from the commercial vehicles, which are the PSVs and these vehicles that farmers operate from, and we keep it as a private one. I'm not attacking people who have cars, but we keep it for the people who possess those cars. Isn't that fair?
It is not fair, because it have a spiral effect, you see. Let me give you an example, Abdi. As a lecturer, I go for a loan and buy a car. And when I buy that car, I pay tax in Mombasa. Okay? I fuel that car. The fuel has some levies.
Yes, VAT.
Okay?
VAT, yeah.
Remember, I went for a bank loan. And then I go back to the university. The bank loan is deducted. NSSF is deducted, Tier 1 and Tier 2. NHIF, now SHIF. Okay? The housing levy. Okay? Abdi, can I continue?
Yes, you can. Because they are there.
Retirement pension scheme.
Yes.
Okay? Are you seeing? What is my take home? And now you are coming back and telling me to do what? To pay 2.5% of the vehicle. From where now? From which payslip? And it has been deducted to nothing. So what Kenyans are saying, even those Mama Mboga, what they are saying, I'm sure they have not read about this finance bill. But by the Holy Spirit, they know that this thing is not very good. Okay?
By the Holy Spirit.
Yes. And something else, Andy, is that apart from this, when you look at this budget, if you look at the education sector, the higher education, they have deducted a lot of money from the higher education. University funding board, they have deducted 5.2 billion. The Commission for University Education, they deducted around 40 million. The Open University, which they have just launched the other day, they deducted 200 million. What is it? A development budget for infrastructure, they deducted around 90 million. Okay? And then, that is on the higher education. And they are talking about the funding model, the new funding model. And that is why recently the universities were advised to retrieve the letters, the admission letters. Where will the university get the money? Where, if it is not the school fees, now that they are reducing? So I'm seeing the committee is doing a less work for the Ministry of Education. When we come to the lower level, the secondary and the junior and the primary, they have also reduced the money. And for your information, Abdi, there is no allocation for special needs students. The vulnerable in the society, there is no allocation. Get it from me, Abdi. There is no allocation for that. Okay? There is no allocation for SEMASTEA, that is the Center for Mathematics, Science and Technology. And where are we heading? Where are we going to get the 21st century skills? If we are killing the math, science and technology. Abdi, we are, you see, the investment in human capital is the gist of the economy in any country in the world. And the human capital here is the education. When you reduce the budget for education, and then you are weakening the economy. And when the income is constant for everybody, and you are raising the expenses, and then I think we are doing, if the income is increased, we don't mind about the expenses. We don't mind about the taxes being increased. But imagine, Abdi, your income is still at the same level as 5 years ago. But taxes, every corner. So I think we need to do a little bit more on that. The last one, NEC, they reduced 3.9 billion. 3.9 billion for NEC. So what do you think about that?
That's why I'm asking you, what do you think about it? But given that you have asked me, I know that after submissions and counter submission, the Ministry of Education, in terms of Parliament, what it has settled to give the basic education, it is 142 billion that will include primary and secondary. The education, in terms of higher learning, it is 127 billion. When it comes to technical and vocational training colleges, it is 30 billion. Those are the allocations that this time around in the fiscal year for the 2024-2025 that will be presented before Parliament. That is what the Minister has accorded the various institutions, especially within the Ministry of Education. Okay, I'll be coming back to you, Daktari. Omondi, we are talking about commensurate. You take the taxes, but at the end of the day, we want to see how it is used, because that was the other concern that was raised within this public hearing. It should be commensurate to the amount of taxes that is being taken. Given that we have corruption and revenue leakages, what will be the viable option for the government? Should it seal these leakages that we are witnessing, not just within the government, even within the private sector itself? These leakages, revenue leakages we are witnessing, should the focus be on that, so that at least as much as we are paying these taxes, at the end of the day, if you're seeing those roads, if you're seeing those institutions that are being brought up, if you're seeing the services improved, will that not be the goal that the current government is seeking for self-sufficiency within our country?
Yeah, Abdi, I think stuff to do with efficiency of how we revenue expenditure, which we've discussed here before, is a big issue here, because one of the things that how we spend our budget is that we know that for every 100 shillings we collect, 70% goes to pay loans, and 30% is consumed into mismanagement and corruption. So we remain with like absolutely nothing to spend, because, for example, we have a 4 trillion budget, and how much are we able to collect? The prospects of whatever revenue we are going to receive is like 2.9 trillion. And 2.9 trillion, we are going to pay, loans goes to 1.8 trillion. And we have a budget, a very big wage bill to deal with. Because of, why do we have a very big wage bill? Because of duplication of functions, for example. I told you, for example, if you go to the county government, in my county, if you need a title deed, then you need to go to the registrar of lands at the county, who is an officer of the national government. But at the same time, in the same county, we have directors and CC lands, director lands, and we have the chief officer lands at the devolved, as a devolved unit, who are paid also salaries. But they don't deal with, they don't help you to do with issues to do with lands if you have issues to do with lands, because it's a prerogative of the national government to deal with lands all over the country. You get me? So there's duplication of duties, and this makes our wage bill very high. And if we have, like, for example, it said almost 0.8 trillion goes to just the interest of the loans that we are borrowing. You know very well the Kenya Kwanza government came into power with a policy or a manifesto that they are not going to borrow anymore, right?
Yes.
And now they are not borrowing even to do development. They are borrowing to pay debts, which is absurd. So even our budget today is unrealistic, because if you are only able to, we hoped that one day we get to have a very realistic budget where we are able to fund our expenditure out of on-source revenue, the revenues we collect, that we know that from 2.9 trillion, that is what we are able to collect. Then we can start planning, what do we put in education, what do we put where, what do we put where, out of 2.9 trillion. But you see, the budget deficit is too wide. That means that for us to even fund the 4 trillion budget, as much as we want to do many things, for us to even fund the 4 trillion budget, we still have to go back borrowing. And where do we borrow? Domestic borrowing has become very expensive. You know very well that the borrowing that we've been doing from, is it China or wherever, they've become so expensive on our budget. So we are lingering we need to do what we call serious austerity measures. Serious austerity measures. From the travels that the president has also talked about, to the leakages you're talking about, corruption that eats our almost 30% of our budget, mismanagement, things like duplication of functions. Then there's another horror thing in the budget which we call the pending bills. Imagine the pending bills of the national government are 570 billion on pending bills. National government takes 2.5 billion out of the 4 trillion. Goes to national government. Yes. And then the county governments take 400 billion.
Yes.
The 400 billion, 165 billion should be going to pending bills. So that means that even the 400 billion is also able to do it. And now there is we keep on employing still, and then the wage bill is going up. So when we keep on doing this and we end up with a budget for the 4 trillion budget that we have, only 700 billion is earmarked for development. And that means we are not going to get any growth. The cost of living will go so high, and we won't be able to fund it. So something serious must happen. A radical thing must happen. For example, things like, as much as Prof talks about, the salaries have remained the same and taxes are going up. But still, we have to have a conversation on, one, the wage bill, salaries, for example. For example, parliamentarians and people of higher cadre and all these people who occupy this state office can take salary cuts, for example. And we reduce on whatever we're going to spend. Because if we keep on having a budget with a very big deficit, imagine 2.9 trillion, that's what we are able to collect. And we have a budget of 4 trillion. How are we going to fund that budget? And we have all these things that are not able to be controlled, like pending bills and everything that is going to drain. And again, the biggest problem that we will experience with this budget is external forces, like effects of climate change. We've been coming from floods to drought, and it is expensive to manage a budget when all of a sudden, there are floods that we have to deal with. You remember yesterday, the Minister for Roads and Transport is saying that they're going to spend 42 billion on the damage that is caused by
37.3.
It was 37.3. On the damage that was caused by the floods. That means that in our previous budget, probably we never planned for that.
Yes.
And are we planning for disaster management in the 2024-2025 budget? Because we must also put in place system to deal with disaster management, which is going to be very expensive. So at the end of the day, unless a radical move is done, we stop on some of the things, and then we are going to, it's going to boomerang on us at some level.
Okay, even had Ndidi Nyoro, the budget committee chair, was speaking on that issue in terms of budgeting for disasters that are unforeseen, so that when it comes, there is adequate funds to ensure that it addresses that. Given that we're entering the final leg, let me start with you, James. A minute, please, each one of you. Let me start with you, James, your final remarks, especially on the budget, as you react as well.
You cut my time short by a minute.
A minute, please.
And you're asking me to discuss tax in a minute, but I'll try. I'm going to do two things in a minute that you've given me. I want to play both the devil's advocate as well as criticize the government a bit. Now, the budget of 4 trillion is a very expensive budget. And given the debt level that we have in the country and the fact that we've been externally borrowing, it is only fair that we pay taxes from our local sources. I don't think there's any one of us who has a problem with paying taxes. If you look through the regimes of the different countries, I think in Scandinavia the taxes are exceptionally higher than what we have. The Denmark, Norways, and the Swedens of this country. The tax goes even up to almost 60% of the tax that is there. But the question is, when you collect it, what do you do with it? Because that is where now the corruption comes in. If the taxes we were collecting would work for us, then I don't think any of us would have a problem even paying taxes as close to 60%. Because at the end of the day, if my disposable income is low, but I still have to pay school fees for the children, I still have to afford medical, and I still have to do my own investment, then I'm literally going home with nothing. And if those taxes would work for us, then that is where it would come in. But now I want to look at the other side of the changes that we bring in. Because in attempting to bridge that deficit that Omondi was talking about, then we have to introduce certain tax measures that come with this. For one, I think we've seen on this finance bill the attempted introduction of taxes on distribution, on software distribution.
Yes.
Now that has been always a very critical area, because even the courts at the High Court have made a decision with respect to taxation of softwares. But now we are introducing a tax even on distributors of software, and the net effect is that what we are doing is in a way going against the international best practice. Eco-levy, for example. When we introduce a tax on eco-levy, and we're saying that we're introducing it because we have to deal with the negative impact of some of these products. Now, I've seen on the finance bill, I think the attempted introduction on eco-levy is on 46 products. But all those products that we are attempting to tax, there are some that are even way more harmful than the 46 that we've taxed. My colleague talked on diapers. I would not understand why we want to introduce eco-levy on diapers. But even if we collect it, you remember the problem we had with the affordable housing levy last year?
Yes, okay.
When we were introducing a tax that will, and we didn't really have legislation for it. There is no legislation for the eco-levy in itself. How do we ring fence the contribution or the collection so that it goes to the proper effect that it is intended to go to? So there are both positives and negatives, but the net effect is, as Omondi was saying, when we collect the taxes that we are collecting,
James.
Are the taxes that we are collecting working for us? And why would we have a budget of 4 trillion when the government is telling us they're falling short of collecting PYE by about 300 billion tax? Yeah.
Philip, kindly stick to the minute.
Has led efficiency in collection and austerity measures in executing our budget. I've always argued against a bloating budget every year. while service delivery perhaps is affected, not just at the national level, but even at the county level. There are pockets of things that we budget for that are necessarily not facilitating the economy or not facilitating service delivery. We must extract them out of that budget template. I've seen in government budgeting, for example, where a governor's office, for instance, budgets for medals, budgets for hospitality and so forth. But those medals are never given, those awards are never given in any fiscal year. So in addressing those pockets, those voteheads that are stale, and chucking them out of our budget, we'll get to have a lean budget that we can finance. But to reinforce what James was talking about, taxing some aspects of the economy and not others. For taxing distribution of software, and that's a discussion we should have, because some of the biggest and largest multinationals are distributors of software. Because it's not a traditionally taxed environment, then the space has been so rigid that they don't pay to government the distribution. Every year why we make the finance bill, for example, is to incorporate some of the new aspects that could generate government revenues. And one of them is that distribution aspect.
We will
and
be
I
taxed
can argue
on
about it next time.
Now we're going to be taxed on it. Finally, Daktari. No, James, let Daktari, because the time is up. Daktari, kindly conclude, tafadhali.
Thank you.
In just a few seconds, please.
Thank you, Abdi. If the government is exempting government vehicle, they should also exempt school buses and university buses. Number two, going forward, I suggest that we should have civic education before public participation. Thank you for the invitation.
Omondi, 30 seconds, please. Umetetewa kidogo kwa nyuma, 30 seconds.
I mean, the thing is that in my whole thing, that we really need to check what you're going to do about this wage bill and about the 4 trillion budget. See how we can be able to budget it. The last one on tax, on what James was talking about, we should stop, or we should not allow government to tax assets. Because when they start taxing vehicles, the next time they will start taxing houses and they will start taxing a suit. Assets, but they should just tax income.
That is in theory. We'll wait to see that. Thank you so much. That is Oscar Omondi, a political analyst. James Chwanya, a tax manager from PKF. Unfortunately, James, pole sana, time imeisha. If we go beyond that, we'll be taxed now. Philip Pande, youth inclusion advisor, also an economist. Thank you for coming in. And finally, the gentleman at the end is Dr. Benjamin Koskei, a governance expert, as well as a lecturer from Kenyatta University. Thank you for making time, gentlemen, for this vital discussion. It is an important week. We are waiting to see what will happen at the corridors of the August House, where the Treasury Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani will be presenting the ever highest budget we have in our country to date. That is 4.00. No, sorry, apologies, Njuguna Ndugu. Apologies, I'm rushing with time. Apologies for that. This is Professor Njuguna Ndugu who will be presenting this particular budget of 4.006. For now, good afternoon. My colleague Khalid Abdullah is already in studio for Kurunzi Mashinani. Don't go too far.